Hello, and thank you for giving the opportunity to present SUCHO. I'm Andreas Segeberg. I'm one of nearly 1,500 volunteers that have been working around the clock the last 3 months to trying to save as much as possible from the online Ukrainian culture heritage. When I'm not working with this, I'm a research engineer at the University of Gothenburg and a lecturer in digital preservation at the same university. So, as thing has developed with SUCHO, one could actually argue for that the O in SUCHO could be crossed out, since we now have safeguarded pretty much all that we could find online, and our focus is kind of shifting towards saving the Ukrainian culture heritage by digitization. I will speak a little bit more about that in the end of this presentation. As you probably know, there are a lot of initiatives out there that in different ways tries to help saving the Ukrainian cultural heritage. One example is SUM, that you will hear about from the next speaker, the Saving the Ukrainian Monuments. SUCHO's main focus, though, has been on the online resources that have been published by GLAMS. And in the following slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about how SUCHO has organized, some of the tools that we have used, and some of the lessons that we learned over the last 3 months. So, here's a little bit messy overview of SUCHO's workflows. The community is organized through Slack. And we can say that SUCHO, we all rely on free to use or preferably open source self-hosted software. But all community organization happens within Slack, and tasks are organized in a giant Google spreadsheet, which is pretty amazing to see that hundreds and hundreds of people that previously we don't know each other, only common thing that we have is some sort of domain knowledge of a cultural heritage. And that we can manage to make such a simple tool work to get organized, and that it actually doesn't get messed up. Well, it doesn't get messed up that bad, I could say. Nevertheless, so the SUCHO project started as forming from many other initiatives that were started by a few people. For myself, I started to archive websites from local governments and the most obvious sites that were out there, and we saw that a lot of people were trying to save stuff into the Internet Archive. So then we had Sebastian Mastrovich from the Austrian Center for Digital Humanities, who tweeted out that he set up this Google form for harvesting suggestions for websites of Ukrainian digital heritage sites that we should try to save. And this kind of worked from mouth to mouth, and suddenly within, I would say, 3-4 days, we were about 800 people that were starting to get organized and starting to archive a lot of this content. So I will go and speak a little bit more in detail about the workflows that you see here. But we have 3 main workflows where we save stuff locally, and the other main route, so to speak, is saving stuff to the Internet Archive. So the SUCHO initiative, we are divided into groups depending on the technology savviness of people. So you don't have to be a programmer, or you don't have to have too much knowledge about web archiving to do stuff. So we have those that work with submitting links to Internet Archive. There's a function where you can batch upload URLs that will be ingested to the Wayback Machine. And this is something that you could do, that if you can manage to copy and paste stuff into Google Sheet, you can archive stuff into the Internet Archive. So we have a lot of people that are currently doing this. Some other sites, let's see. Many of the sites can be captured by automated web crawlers like Heritrix and alike. Some of them have some special features, such as virtual tours. What you see here is a site of an archaeological site, I believe. And when you have these virtual tours, you need a human being to kind of interact with the stuff in order to save them. So we have a bunch of people that are actually visiting all of these online museums and exhibitions and clicking around, zooming in and out to make sure that they record as much as possible. Then, of course, we have people that work with metadata and act as metadata creators for the content that are being archived at the Internet Archive. So here's just a screenshot of that. The metadata creators also curates the spreadsheets and the other stuff that goes on within SUCHO and the tools we use there. Then we have something called Browsertrix. So Browsertrix is an automated web crawler, which is using an open source web recorder software. And we have volunteers that run on their laptops, on servers, or even on Raspberry Pi devices. So basically how it works is that you give them a seed URL and you say, I want to crawl this whole domain, and it will go to the first page, and then it will find all the links on that page, and then it will, so to speak, crawl all over them, and eventually when it's done, hopefully the whole page has been visited and the content has been saved locally. Some sites, like library catalogs and repositories, don't have URLs that could be extracted from web crawlers. They can't be easily followed. So we have a special group that write custom code to capture contents of those sites. Here, for example, is a DSpace site from a library in Odessa that has rare books and prints. So we have people that work with this too, so that we're able to capture as much as possible of those very hard sites. We have people that are situation monitoring. They monitor the development of the war and helps to prioritize what content and sites and stuff that needs to be saved first. And then we have the data wizards, which works with visualizations of the collected materials, and together with the situation monitor group, monitors the status of the Ukrainian part of the internet. For example, if we have big power outages, or if we need to locate a specific server where it's located within, like in the physical space of Ukraine. If it's near a place that is currently getting shelled, maybe that's something we need to address before something else. So when we work with this, we could see some obvious threats. Of course, there's the possibility of direct hits from shelling. We have seen some examples of that. Here's a tweet. I realize now it's translated by Google into Swedish, which probably doesn't make sense for the most of you in there, but it says that the MDA denazified the library at Sumi Polytechnic with 5 bombs. And of course, shelling can be a cause that you have. If it's not a direct hit, it could lead to power outages. And of course, we have hacking attacks and overloading, like denial of service attacks, is something that those are quite obvious threats when we are in a situation in war. But then we have realized that there are also some maybe not so obvious threats that you need to think about a little bit when you're doing a rescue operation like this. And one of these is actually that well-meaning archivists or volunteers can act like DDoSers, becoming a denial of service attack when we try to rescue things. So this is actually a screenshot from when I downloaded the rare books from the Odessa library, and we had thousands of files that were around, huge high-resolution scans in PDF or DVGU format, and they are around 500 megabytes, maybe a gigabyte a piece. And as you can see on the most right part of this little screenshot, the download speed is like 29.5 kilobytes a second. So it took me actually 2 months to download all of this content. You could be tempted to start more workers to kind of speed up the process, but then you risk of overloading the server and maybe doing more damage than doing good. So that's something that you need to think about when you try to help, so you don't mess things up even worse. So it's been a balance all along, trying to do this in a speedy manner so we don't lose things, and don't do it too aggressively so we mess things up. Another thing is that obviously servers located in Ukraine are something that are under threat of being shelled or power outages or alike. But also stuff that are hosted outside of Ukraine can be targeted by hacking attacks or denial of services. But there's also a risk of, when you are in a war, maybe you don't really think about, I need to pay that bill for the domain name or stuff like that. So they are at risk because of the war and the stress and the trauma that brings. And there's also a risk of that we are archiving mis and disinformation. So on the right side image there's just a conversation that we had in the group of Slack, that we saw a big outage of website that went down, and then all of a sudden they all popped up again, and we said that hopefully they have content, and someone commented on that and said, well, hopefully they have the same content. Maybe this isn't like the biggest issue. I mean, we have source criticism processes that should apply, but they can pose a problem if we want to publish something, if we want to make this content available again, we have to be careful to tell people about that it can contain mis or disinformation if we do that, so we don't endorse all the content just because it's that same old problem that we have with archives and museums alike, I guess. And some other challenges that we met could be Yeah. So misconfigured systems. Someone said that DSpace, I don't think there's any DSpace installation nowhere in the world that is properly installed. But this was something that was very frustrating sometimes because we try to make generic solutions for problems because there are a lot of people that use the same type of system. And once you think that you have a solution for a group of a system or something, then you get into problems because you have misconfigurations and you can't use the scripts and special developed programs that we use. So we need to keep track of them, and you need to kind of handle them by themselves and do special solutions for them. Yeah. One other thing that caused a lot of problem. Here's a screenshot from the Wayback Machine, where the Wayback Machine itself tried to archive war.ukraine.ua, which is a site that was started by the Ukrainian government to report on the events of the war. We have people within SUCHO that also volunteers in other projects. One of them is trying to help Ukrainian governments to safeguard against DDoS, denial of service attacks. And one of those services is Cloudflare, that has been also been generously enough to provide their services free of charge. So this is we kind of want to help them to withstand the threats of attacks, but this poses a big problem for us too, because Cloudflare is very effective on keeping web crawlers out as well. So when we help them to get Cloudflare, we kind of can't help them with archiving their sites in an automated manner. That is. So, some statistics. This is an outtake from the Internet Archive, and it was some statistics between the 15th and the 30th of March. And this was a period when we were very active, and there were a lot of content that was going into the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine. And as you can see, we average on about 4 million pages a day. And I would say that we had the same kind of amount of things going into the Wayback Machine throughout April. Now in May, and when May soon turns into June, I would say that we have kind of gotten everything that we could. And it's starting to develop into a different kind of product, which I will speak a little bit about in a bit. And SUCHO, we managed to. These are actually not pretty good figures or statistics, because like storage of scanned documents, like the total amount of storage space is not a good. Yeah, but it says something that 40 terabytes of data is quite a bit of data. And it has been collected from over 4,500 websites and digital exhibitions and repositories and whatnot from museums, libraries, and archives in Ukraine. So, some lessons learned from this journey. One is that open data has been absolutely essential for doing this. And here are some examples of the open data that we have been using. One of these are the so-called zone files, which is DNS information about particular domain names, for example, the name of a web server for the domain and, if applicable, their respective IP addresses. With this sort of information, we could extract and find out where in Ukraine a server was located. We could also try to find more subdomains that were that was connected or was part of a museum or similar. So it was a way of getting more URLs that should be archived. We also used Wikidata, searching for Wikipedia articles that mentions or are tagged with museums, and we could say that that should be a part of Ukraine, and then we can find out if there was an official website for that one. So that was very useful for us to, at least in the beginning, to try to extract as many and identify as many museums as possible. We also used OpenStreetMaps for locating museums and archives. In this particular, we have plotted out 686 museums that was located inside of Ukraine. This is just a visualization, but of course there's other data underneath. And with this was particularly helpful in trying to find where do we start and where do we put our prioritizations. Yeah, and people, I would say, is very essential to making something like this happen. And I'm not only speaking about the 1,500 volunteers of SUCHO, but I'm thinking of this more in terms of that you need contact with local people to help identify, to help out with all the stuff that we don't know. So this is something that I think we need to think about in the future, that we need more collaborations between countries and making contacts and making this a part of as a precaution. So the next steps for SUCHO, I would say, is two. One is that we are now starting with the coordination of donations. We have been collaborating with the Amazon Web Services, which has been very generous of letting us using their cloud computing platforms for SUCHO. So they have been sponsoring us. And they are now taking the next steps, and we are actually able to make donations from the Amazon's stock or the catalog of computers and scanners and cameras and whatnot. So this is something that we are now in the middle of building up, and we are receiving a lot of requests of donations, and we are trying now to map them from specific requests to more generic terms that can be ordered from Amazon and then shipped into Ukraine. So this was a little bit about what I talked about in the beginning, about that we are now more focusing on saving Ukrainian cultural heritage by digitization. The other one is long-term storage. Even though we got very good support from Amazon and other services as well, we need to find a long-term solution and for storage and management of the collected materials. So we are now seeking partnership with different institutions around the world that could help us with harboring and safeguarding the stuff as long as needed. There's also an open collective project that is initiated by SUCHO, where we try to raise funds for the long term of this project. So with that, I would like to say thank you. This was a very brief introduction, and I have tried to say something about a lot of things. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas, for your presentation and on the behind-the-scenes work of SUCHO and on the future steps. You echo some of the comments that we heard earlier from Aparna and Aparna Tandon. And you all know we have a closing panel where all the speakers will be furthering some of these ideas. So Aparna will come back to further some of these ideas. Andreas, I better check just a minute. Andreas, do we have some questions? Yes. And so first questions, having that experience, what have you done differently? What would you have done differently and why? So-called lessons learned?
Yeah, I think one thing that I would have done differently is, but that would have needed to start ages ago, because I kind of regret that I don't have, the contacts that I have now in Ukraine. That would be something that would have helped a lot. We do now have a lot of contacts in Ukraine, but they are very crucial to make things happen. And making, especially when it comes to physical things that you need to get shipped and organized. So that is, I would say that's the thing that I've been, thinking a lot about. How can we, do this and get organized for, God forbid, similar situations in the future.
Okay, so I hear the network and having friends and having good connections is essential. That's also part of your strategy on the future. So we know this needs to start now across. For instance, in the CIDOC meetings, we have such a network. So please exchange numbers. We have another question. I'm interested in the disinformation archive, but I couldn't find it as a resource. Could you give me a keyword hint or part of the URL to find that?
It's actually there's a link in the presentation which links to the presentation in a more dynamic form. In that presentation, there will be more proper references for the tweets and stuff.
Okay, great. Okay, so these were the online questions. Do we have on-site questions? Yes, there's one above, last row.
Okay, thank you. In order to figure out how much work has to be still carried out, it will be interesting to know the total amount of cultural websites in Ukraine, or at least the approximative share of documents that have been scanned up to now on the wall. Because you said that you scanned the document, 40 million scanned document from 4,500 websites. So it will be interesting to know how much in proportion on the wall has to be still done.
It's really hard to give an exact number of how much, because what we can say is that we have saved this amount of resources. A resource could be a part of a web page, it could be an image, it could be a PDF that's stored on there. These are analysis that we will do later on, because the focus has been on holding as much as possible and trying to figure out what we actually like. Numbers and stuff like that is something that we probably going to do, but it has not been prioritized to do that because all the focus has been on saving as much as possible. So I can't really give, a really good number on what we have done. So that's the best I can say is like it's 40 terabytes of a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you. Looking at the room. I'm actually, as I mentioned before, is there, oh yes, I see Mika has a question.
I wonder if I could ask for your assistance in a thing that is not related to Ukraine or the actual work of SUCHO. The National Museum of Afghanistan is about to lose its domain, and it has also already lost its emails, and this is due to migration of people. There are not people who could solve the problem are not reachable, and the operator who has control of the domain is totally unresponsive. And the domain is about to expire, or actually it has expired. It's now in its grace period. And I would like to prevent the situation where it gets hijacked by some outside operator. So could we communicate about this privately after this conference?
Absolutely. I'll post my contact. I think Laura has or the organization has my contacts. So please reach out and we'll have a look at it, of course.
Thank you very much.
We'll be sure that Mika gets your information because that's quite, building this network of knowledge and this network of know-how to, technical know-how to help the preservation of our heritage, even if it's on digital form. It's just nice if it can be repositioned on other areas. And along that, I have a question. I'm keeping an eye on your hands, and if I don't see you, wave harder, and also on the chat. So my question has to do with: do you sense that, of course, you have learned a lot and your network has gone stronger, but do you sense any change in the general digital literacy of the cultural heritage community in this effort?
Yeah, absolutely. Without doubt, I can say that it's been, people have been trained very, very fast. And actually we have, it's spread to like the people at the Internet Archive are also involved in the SUCHO initiative and acts like a first-line support for SUCHO and SUCHO only. So it's been a tremendous, helpful to see that people from like big companies that go in and they say, hey, we can help. And that has really shortened to be able to ask the question to the right person immediately is of course very helpful for learning stuff and imitate bugs and stuff and yeah, and people have been working around the clock, and I guess that contributes as well. And the motivation of doing something is also something that is important in the learning experience of this. But I mean, a lot of people, especially Quinn Dombrowski, who's one of the organizers, she'd never done anything on web archiving before. And she actually have her 6-year-old kids helping out, clicking around websites and doing manual recording of stuff. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing.
So besides understanding that there is a web archive and how you do it, is there one major thing on this debunking the digital or, this fear of the digital, or what do you find as the key digital literacy skill that has been gained?
It's hard to say, actually, when you put it that way. I would say that people aren't afraid of touching the command line. You know, it's not, or because we have been a community where people have been cheering on and saying that, well, you can do like this, it's no problem, your computer is not going to break down or anything, just copy and paste this, and, you know, giving the tools to people, and they actually, you know, can try and they can feel that they contribute, and they do contribute with computer power and sort of stuff, but they do get direct help and can see that it's not that, you know, difficult, and it's not that intimidating at all, you know, and stuff doesn't break for you. Yeah. So maybe that.
Well, that sounds wonderful. So we're not afraid of touching the command line. So for all of us here who haven't done that, please, let's get us started. Well, help me thank Andreas for his wonderful presentation. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining.